If you don't like what Joe Douglas is doing at One Jets Drive, I just don't know what to tell you. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So, Joe Douglas comes into the offseason, comes into the free agency period. He knows he needs a right guard. He knows he needs some tight ends. He knows he's got to start getting this defense fixed up because it was a disaster last season, worse than team history. Joe Douglas does exactly that. Joe Douglas hasn't been perfect, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But we come into free agency, Joe Douglas, right off the bat, he signs Laken Tomlinson, guard from the San Francisco 49ers. Played on the left side with the 49ers, will likely transition to the right side with the Jets. Some people seem to be freaking out about that. I don't get why. I understand it's a different position. I understand it's not easy. I understand it won't happen overnight. But I also understand I've seen a million guys do it before. The oldest and best example I could probably think of is old Jets tackle Jason Fabini, drafted out of Cincinnati to play right tackle. Did a really nice job there, flips over to the left side, didn't skip a beat. And we see it often. I mean, Brandon Moore, remember Brandon Moore? Some fans may not realize this. He was a defensive tackle in college who was undrafted and had a stellar career with the Jets, underappreciated player. But Brandon Moore goes from defensive tackle to right guard and has a phenomenal career. So if Brandon Moore can go from DT to right guard and do absolutely fine, I have zero concerns about a Pro Bowl left guard being able to flip to the right. Again, I'm not saying it'll be it's going to take more than a day. It's not going to be instant. There will be some hiccups for Tomlinson as he transitions, but maybe not as much as you think because he did play a little bit there in college, but that's quite a few years back. But I don't think this is going to be an issue at all. I think anyone freaking out over it is going a little bit overboard. AVT is your left guard. You don't want to stunt this growth. Move Tomlinson to the right side. Now your O-line is shored up as long as Mekhi Becton, and we're going to talk about him now before we get into the next round of free agents because Mekhi Becton, in my mind, is now behind Zach Wilson in terms of just being he's the second most important guy in this roster, as far as I'm concerned. If he comes to camp ready, which I believe he will, comes to camp healthy, which I believe he will, and stays healthy, and no one on the line misses significant time, someone will have to explain to me how this is not a sort of top 10, potentially top 5 O-line. Don't forget, Mekhi Becton, did he have his hiccups as a rookie? Absolutely. Struggled a little bit in pass pro at times, but we expected that. For those of us who watched Becton in college and saw what the way Louisville ran their offense, we knew coming into the pros, his pass sets were going to have to be a lot better. He was going to be dropping back. The ball at the pro level isn't out. Watch Becton in Louisville, and the ball is consistently out in 1.5 seconds. Didn't have to sustain blocks for a long time. Then you go from that to having to sustain blocks against NFL rushers versus the guys you're facing at Louisville. Of course, there were going to be some struggles. So Becton gave up a handful of sacks as a rookie, to be expected. But he also was throwing bodies all over the field. I've made the case, and many others have, that what Mekhi Becton does on Sundays when he executes his assignment, that guy plays at a Hall of Fame caliber level. And you can say that's crazy, but show me another guy who throws linemen around the way Mekhi Becton does. So if Becton is healthy and he's playing alongside AVT, and I say that because I believe Becton will come into camp and he will win that left tackle job back. You're going to have Becton next to AVT. You're going to have a hard time finding a better young left side in the NFL. Of course, Connor McGovern in the middle, who's a nice player. Laken Tomlinson, you now got a Pro Bowl guard. And then George Fant, who's a very good player at right tackle. McGovern is probably the weak link, and he's not a bad player. 3 or 4 years ago, McGovern would have been the number one guy on this line. And because of the upgrades Joe Douglas has made with AVT, with Tomlinson, with Fant, with Becton, the guy who would have been your best guy a few years ago is probably your weakest guy right now. And he might get replaced. There's been talk about that. But there's also been talk about, will the Jets, despite signing Laken Tomlinson and having their 5 spots set on the O-line, will they consider trading Mekhi Becton and drafting Ikem Ekwonu at number 4? As crazy as that sounds, because when I first heard it, Rich Cimini floated it. He wasn't reporting it. He wasn't saying he was being told that. It was a thought that Cimini had that maybe they still take Ekwonu when they look to move Becton. My knee-jerk reaction was, why would you trade a guy that you just took at number 11 2 years ago if he's healthy? And I think the answer is, and again, I'm not predicting a trade. I'm just saying in my mind what circumstances would have to be present to get the Jets to move on from Mekhi Becton. And it would have to be as we know, and I talked about this in the video last week, and I like Mekhi Becton. I think he's going to be a great player. But the Jets this offseason let it be known to the public by leaking to the media that Mekhi Becton was putting on weight during his rehab. I don't know if everyone realizes how bad of a look that is, but that's pretty bad. And if the Jets are speaking internally and saying, listen, this guy might not be bought all the way in, and maybe he goes out right now and drops a ton of weight and comes to camp in great shape, but we suspect this will be an issue again in the future. We think this is going to be a pattern. He's a huge guy, right? But if he's putting on weight while he's supposed to be rehabbing, that's a red flag. And I mean, does that sound to you like an all gas, no brake mentality? You want your guys, as Robert Saleh says all the time, get better every single day. And then you have your star young left tackle rips his knee up in week 1. You want him to rehab it. He's rehabbing, but in the meantime, he's getting heavier. If they've decided amongst themselves that they don't believe he's fully invested, or if they believe that this will be an ongoing thing, which it may or may not, it'll be years before we know, is it unreasonable to say the Jets may maybe watch a little bit of Ikem Ekwonu and say, this guy's a monster. He gets after it. He's not as big as Mekhi. He's not as strong as Mekhi, but he's still a franchise left tackle. And maybe you say, look, if we can get a 2 from Mekhi and upgrade at tackle and upgrade in terms of durability and just flat out ability, at least at this point. Like I said, Becton's got some holes in his game. He's got the higher ceiling, don't get me wrong. But that's the only reason I can see the Jets looking to make a move, is if they have decided internally that this will be an ongoing thing for Becton in terms of keeping his weight under control. They probably, again, I have no doubt they were not very happy that he wasn't as invested as he should have been. Joe Douglas said in his postseason presser, Mekhi's got to come to camp in better shape. So they've addressed it publicly. They leaked it to the media so it would come out again through Mike Garafolo with the NFL Network, who reported about the weight gain. So the Jets are clearly not enamored or not as happy with Becton as you would think. And I'm not sitting here saying they are going to trade him. I'm just saying that my initial reaction to Rich Cimini's tweet, to Rich Cimini's suggestion, which was, what the hell is he talking about? It went from that to like, you know what? Maybe. And part of the reason for that is you look around the league, one of the most respected guys right now in terms of general managers, Chris Ballard with the Colts, right? And what did he just do? He gave up premium draft capital for Carson Wentz, brought him in, saw him up close, and said, you know what? I'm going to go apologize to the owner, and then I'm getting rid of this guy. Like, recognize your mistake and move on. And if the Jets feel like there's any chance Mekhi Becton was a mistake, maybe they move on. I'm not saying they will, I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that I don't think it's as outlandish as it sounds when you first hear it. Because as I said, I saw it, just went clickbait, whatever. But it wasn't an article. It was literally just a tweet from Cimini saying, did the Jets entertain the thought of trading Becton? So we'll have to wait and see. I hope he's back. I hope he's a monster. I hope he's playing to his full potential because, as I just said, I think the dude can be a Hall of Famer. So I want him back. I want him healthy. I want him ready to go, and I want to see him dominate. So we'll know in a few months, maybe a few weeks, what's going to happen there. But Becton being moved, something to keep an eye on. So the Jets bring in Laken Tomlinson, back to the free agency piece now. Then the biggest need behind that was tight end. What does Joe Douglas do? C.J. Uzomah from the Cincinnati Bengals, 6'6" tight end, who the Bengals lined up all over the formation. He lined up out wide. He lined up in line. He lined up at H-back. They use him at fullback as a lead blocker at times. And then Tyler Conklin from Tennessee, who is a guy who never really had a chance to play until this year, and he showed he can play. And what I love about these moves, both these moves, neither of these guys have to come off the field. They're both pass catchers. They're both pass blockers. They're both run blockers. As I said, you can move them around the formation, and there's no liabilities there. It's not, the current trend, obviously, is to draft these guys who we call them tight ends, and then they're split out wide all the time, and they don't want to block anybody. These are basically hybrids that spend a lot more time as a receiver than they do as a tight end. What the Jets have now, the Jets love that, they love their 2 tight end packages. Now you have 2 tight ends. You can stay on the field, and you can just switch things up without having to sub guys in and out because one guy can't do this and the other guy can't do that. These are both guys who are young and could do it all. So you have to love those moves. DJ Reed, the Jets needed a corner. This is a big one because for people like myself, and I know I'm not alone here. There were a lot of us who felt that Sauce Gardner would be the pick at 4. Now you have to wonder because you just went out and signed DJ Reed, former Seattle Seahawks DB, Seattle corner, 5'9". That jumps out of you. You worry in today's game, all these big receivers, can he match up? And then you watch him on film and you go, okay, he can match up. The guy can play. I'm not going to lie and say I knew much about him before the Jets signed him, but once they did, pop onto the All-22, watch 3 or 4 games, and he looked like a really good player. Phenomenal against the Packers, did a good job against Devontae Adams, and just really, he's a day one starter. He's probably your cornerback 1. Because Bryce Hall's on the other side. I can't see the Jets going out and getting Sauce Gardner at this point, and having 3 starting corners. But as I say, you can never have enough. But at the same time, if Sauce Gardner's not going to get on the field day one, or someone's going to have to sit basically. And my apologies because I have a cold that's battering me. So I apologize for the congestion. So Sauce Gardner, again, a guy who I expected to be the pick at 4, unlikely to be the case now. And then you get Jordan Whitehead. And Jordan Whitehead, again, a guy I recalled from seeing when the Jets played the Bucs earlier in the year. Went back and watched several Bucs games. Popped in the All-22. To me, and I'm not saying this, I know it's fun. We all enjoy making fun of Jamal Adams because he's kind of made a fool of himself, not as good of a player as he says he is or believes he is, but he's still a good player in certain roles. Jamal Adams down inside of the box is a very good player. And that's kind of who Whitehead reminded me of, a less explosive version, however. He's not going to get into the backfield as often as Jamal did. He's not going to get to the quarterback as often as Jamal did because Jamal is that half step quicker. However, Whitehead does line up all over the defense. He lines up in the slot. He lines up outside. Lines up at deep safety. The Bucs used him all over the field. Robert Saleh is going to love that. But his reaction time, his ability to diagnose a play, get to the ball carrier, get through the trash, tackle one-on-one, all this stuff jumped out at me. Just kept seeing it time and time again. Getting the quarterback in the backfield one-on-one on designed runs. Saw that multiple times. Swing passes, screens. He's a guy who's going to really help shore up a Jets defense that got battered last year, and a lot of it took place in the box where the Jets were getting overwhelmed and teams were able to just run it down their throats. I think Whitehead's a guy who helps fix that up. And then Jacob Martin, an addition they made yesterday, defensive lineman from the Texans, had a bunch of pressures this year, only had a few sacks, watched a few of his games, not overly, he's a backup. He looks like a good player. I believe Connor Hughes tweeted out 38 pressures, 28, 38 pressures. He had a lot of pressures. And I know a lot of fans make fun of pressures. Oh, that's what you say when a guy can't get to the quarterback. Listen, the reason people don't care about pressures, or some people don't care about pressures, is because they don't get points for it in their fantasy football team. Like in real life NFL football, getting the quarterback rattled, getting him off his spot, getting him to have to try to make a throw on the run where he's uncomfortable, that stuff helps the defense. And that's what he did well, and that's what he'll probably be asked to do as a Jet. As a rotation lineman. So the Jets add a little bit of depth there. I think that with the moves they made, a defensive lineman a little bit earlier in the draft is a possibility. Perion Winfrey, Oklahoma, very good player. Again, apologize for the gunk. So that's the free agent list for right now. Wanted to talk about the Blake Cashman trade. Joe Douglas got an asset for Blake Cashman. How crazy is that? It's only a 6th rounder, but it's still a pick. Like, you got someone to give you a draft pick for Blake Cashman, 6th rounder next year. And look, wish the kid well. Blake Cashman's not a bad guy, just couldn't stay on the field. The fact that 3 different coaches kept him around tells you that people like what he can do when he's on the field. The problem is that's literally a few minutes a year. Not going to cut it. So, Cashman's traded. Berrios is back. Good stuff. Tevin Coleman is back. He's a guy, he's on a 1-year deal. It's going to be a deal where they can cut him and move on if they draft a guy or if they sign an or if they bring in an undrafted free agent who outperforms him. I will say, though, in terms of Coleman, I thought he was it didn't really jump out at me the first half last year. Second half, he wasn't great, but he looked better. He looked at a little bit more burst, a little bit more explosion, and his numbers weren't bad in the second half. And, as a third back who knows the offense and has some giddy up, I don't have any problem with the signing. It's not like they gave him a 3-year deal worth $30 million, right? You gave him a 1-year deal. It's probably a little more than the vet minimum. I think it was like 1.3. So it's not a ton of money. Nathan Shepard comes back. Struggled last year with penalties. Had 6, which is insane for a part-time lineman. As I tweeted the other day, I think that's an aberration because really over his previous 3 seasons, he only had 6, and then all of a sudden he has, or I think he had 3 or 4 penalties over the previous 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden, boom, 6 in 1 year. So a little bit of an aberration. Joe Flacco comes back. You got to like that. You know, Zach Wilson gets to come into camp this year with a veteran voice in the room, which is what so many people were critical of the Jets for not doing last year. So Flacco's back. Feeney is back, right? Dan Feeney. That was my least favorite signing Joe Douglas had last year. When I watched him in the preseason, I was terrified. I wanted him cut then. My thought was, I don't want this guy ever blocking for Zach Wilson, ever. And then late in the year, Connor McGovern gets hurt. Feeney comes in, and he was fine. He wasn't great, because nobody's saying he's great. You know, your role as a backup lineman, more times than not, is be capable. Don't get anybody hurt. And Feeney was okay. He was better than I expected. I'll eat crow on that one. I was wrong. I thought the Feeney signing was terrible. It turned out it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And bringing him back, because of my initial reaction this time was, oh, they brought him back. But then I had to remind myself, all right, he played okay. So you got an okay-ish veteran lineman with a ton of starts under his belt. He can play center. He can play guard. I don't hate the move. And speaking of guys who can play guard, Greg Van Roten, right? Due $3 million this year. Got to cut him. I'm not so sure on that. Sometimes these backup guys are good in that role. Look at the way Greg Van Roten played when he was the everyday guy, and it was ugly. He made a lot of mistakes. Later in the year, when they asked him to step in and start a game or two, might have been his best play of the year. Sometimes these guys who can't get it done every single week, they've got enough in the tank to come in for 2 or 3 weeks and play at a decent level. And we saw that from him last year. So maybe Van Roten at $3 million, maybe it's not the worst idea, right? This cold is, man, everyone in my house. It's not COVID. Tested myself like 5 times. My job makes me test every day. Anyway, medical, whatever. So, listen, you bring Feeney back, you bring Shepard back, Coleman, Berrios, all depth guys, all, good guys to have around. The free agency period is going really well. The one criticism I have, and a lot of fans do, and I think it's worth thinking of, I think the implications of it. Joe Douglas and wide receiver. So Joe Douglas had an opportunity to go out and get Amari Cooper. He didn't. Took a pass. Cooper was basically being given away in terms of draft capital. But you were going to have to pay a lot of money for him. I get that. Maybe he didn't want to pay that much. And then the next logical option, you think, well, Allen Robinson, you probably get him for 14 or 15 million. No. Joe Douglas takes a pass on that. And now you're thinking, well, these are both veteran playmaker receivers who can really help your young quarterback. You passed on this one, you passed on another one. Now, with the addition of Allen Robinson in Los Angeles, now Robert Woods is on the block. And to me, if Joe Douglas doesn't make a play for Woods, that tells me Joe Douglas is looking at the draft. He might bring in a lower level, sort of back end of the roster receiver, or even maybe a middle of the pack guy. But in terms of looking for a veteran number one guy, I think Joe Douglas is looking at his roster as currently constructed and thinking, I've got a couple tight ends now who can help in the passing game. Elijah Moore was phenomenal as a rookie. There's no reason to think he won't take another step in year 2. And yes, we've talked about Corey Davis and how he was banged up last year, but same as Nathan Shepard. At this point, it's a one-off. It's not a trend. It's not how he's been historically. So maybe Joe Douglas is looking at it and thinking, there's a ton of receivers in this draft. I'm happy to have Elijah Moore as my 1 and Corey Davis as my 2 and Braxton Berrios in the slot and my 2 tight ends in the middle of the field. And I'll find a receiver, whether it's at 10, which I've which I've not been a fan of for some time now. I've said that I don't like the idea of a receiver at 10. But the more Joe Douglas passes on these receivers, I think he's got his eye on somebody. He must like somebody in this class. But the thing is, this class is so deep, it could be anywhere. It could be round 2 or 3. It could be Christian Watson. It could be George Pickens. I've mentioned Pickens and Watson are probably my two favorite round 2 guys. I love Jahan Dotson, but I think he goes round 1. I think if Jahan Dotson is there at 35, or Pickens, or Watson, any of those guys, what they will bring in year 1, even if they take a little bit of time to get acclimated, they're not coming in and being asked to be the number 1 guy. They would be coming in and being asked to be one of 5 guys who can catch the football. Well, 6 guys. If you got the 2 tight ends now, you got Berrios, you got Moore, you got Davis, and then you got the guy you bring in. So they're going to have a lot of guys on the roster who can catch the football. And Joe Douglas, I believe, I want a vet receiver. I would have been okay with Amari Cooper. The price is a little bit high, but now as we're seeing, the prices are skyrocketing on receivers anyway. So Woods would actually be a bargain. He's around $14, $15 million a year. Not a bad deal considering what other guys are getting. But Joe Douglas, actions speak louder than words. And Joe Douglas said at his postseason presser that this year, more than years past, he'd be willing to make a trade if the opportunity was there. He would strike because the Jets have draft capital and they can fill some needs. Well, Robert Woods is sitting there, and you need a veteran receiver, and his bonus will be paid by the previous team. You bring him in, you've now got a legitimate, proven receiver who's had some really good years and who would fit this offense. And if Joe Douglas says no thank you to that with all the money he has, I'm thinking Joe Douglas is as I think I mentioned this in last week's video, and if not, I apologize, but I think it's sometimes supply and demand. Joe Douglas might be looking at this and saying, there are 8 or 9 or 10 receivers in this class that I would be comfortable plugging them in as part of this offense as the 4th or 5th option early on and let them develop and maybe climb the ladder a little bit. So if Joe Douglas believes he has a 1 in Elijah Moore, and I think he does, and if he believes he has a 2 in Corey Davis, which you can make a case for that, and if he believes he's got a good slot guy in Braxton Berrios, look at the way he played down the stretch, that's not all that crazy of an opinion. And if he likes his tight ends, Joe Douglas just might not be as enamored. He may not feel as much pressure as the fans do to acquire a veteran receiver if he believes in the guys he's brought in. Now they'll have to produce because he's betting on himself. And if they do, he's a genius. And if they don't, people are going to say, Joe, you had these opportunities and you didn't pounce. And now the second-year quarterback, third-year quarterback, however long he's around, is now struggling because you didn't add Allen Robinson, you didn't add Amari Cooper, you didn't add Woods. So plenty of options for Douglas. Still plenty of cap space. My understanding of this makes complete sense. I had a conversation with someone the day free agency started, and I wish I'd mentioned it in the previous video, but I hadn't looked at next year's cap space at that point. When I did go back and look, that's at $115 million projected cap next year before they cut C.J. Mosley, which is likely to happen. So they're looking at $130 million. So I just thought to myself, you can backload these contracts, and not even back, just hey, wait a year. You talk to a free agent, look, you want $8 million a year, fine. We're going to give you $4 million this year, and then we give you 12, 13, whatever next year, and move some of this money back a year or two because it's there. And I haven't seen all of the numbers. Some of the numbers on the deals have come out, but I've seen 1 or 2 people tweet and say that Joe Douglas still has a fair bit of money to play with because he's done just that. He's pushed some of this money back to year 2, which is a great way to do it. So he's in position still to make a big move if he wants to make it. He may not feel like he has to make a big move. It might be all about backfilling and, or getting backups and depth at this point. Maybe a mid-level starter, and then focus on the draft. So that'll do it for this week. Be sure to check out Jet Nation Radio with Alex Varallo and Dylan Terraman. Thanks for checking us out here. And if you like what I want to hear, comments below. Let me know your dream day scenario or your dream scenario on draft day and your nightmare scenario on draft day. Okay? Because I go back and forth. I think, man, Kyle Hamilton at 4, wide receiver at 10, nightmare. Don't want that. But Hamilton's a great player. We go fans like, oh, but the Jamal Adams thing. He's better than Jamal Adams. He can do more than Jamal Adams. I'm not saying he's Ed Reed, but if he's a notch or 2 below Ed Reed, you take him at 4. And I don't have a problem with it. But my dream scenario right now, it was Sauce at 4, right? I did want Sauce Gardner. I don't even know who I want there now. If you're going to deal Becton, by all means, Kevin Kwanwu at 4, best pass rusher at 10, or trade down to the middle of the round. Million possibilities. We'll talk about every single one of them in the coming weeks. Thanks for checking us out. Stay tuned. Stay on board with the what is it? Do the click, the like, the subscribe, all that stuff. You'll get notifications when I drop something. When Jet Nation Radio episodes go up, when Green Bean puts out his videos. So plenty of content coming out, plenty of stuff going on. Thanks for checking us out. As I said, JetNation.com. Register, log into the forums, and speak up as a Jets fan. Join the conversations. Have a good one, Jets fans.